Skyward Saga short story by A.E.R. Knight. Chapter 1. A Warrior Must Watch. She doesn't know what's happening. That much even Malo can see. He's keeping an eye on the young woman because they're taking her family, her whole tribe. The warriors would find themselves under a black glass knife. The women and children, well, that depends. The Char have uses for them. Plenty of work in the city and fields for those willing. Ignos would accept those who were not. Malo keeps a tight grip on his black glass spear and a stern expression on his face. Jaqen won't tolerate compassion. Ignos, the high priest says, demands duty, demands that every sacrifice be taken seriously. But if Malo's being honest, he's worried the girl's going to try something. She's old enough to have spirit, and her face is making that telltale shift from shock to fear to anger, the desperate look that comes when you've nothing left to lose. There are 12 huts, Malo decides, though the ramshackle nature of the plants and sticks holding them together gives evidence that this isn't an old village. A case bolstered by the number of people he sees. Most of the men must sleep outside or on top of each other. He hears Jaqen call for haste. The priest wants to be out of the jungle by nightfall, where the starlight will show any ambush. And because he's listening to the screeching call of his priest, Malo almost misses the moment. Almost. The girl twitches forward, unsure of the action even as she commits to it. She's lunging to the remnants of a cook fire, one still sporting what would have been a meaty feast. A large carving stone, a crude version of the knives the Char forge in Demontem, is her target. She manages to get her grip on it, just as Malo reaches her. It's a moment's decision, to kill or stay. The former wouldn't be questioned, though the girl's death would be regretted as a sacrifice lost. But Malo's seen enough pain today, so he drops his spear, takes her wrists in his own hands, and doesn't flinch when hell itself turns to look at him.
Don't die for nothing,
Malo says, and he manages to stop himself from finishing the Char phrase.
I'm already dead.
The girl replies and she tries to shake him.
Tell me, who are yours?
Malo asks, eyes flicking toward the captives. He wants to offer hope, a chance. It's a lie. He won't be able to save anyone from death or labor, but if it lets the girl's anger drain away, then it's worth it. The question pulls her attention, and he watches her look towards her tribe. They're bunched together, surrounded by Char troops wielding their own spears, and in his colorful feathered robes, Jaqen, who is pointing here and there, sorting the sacrifices into those more honorable than others.
Him.
She relents to hope, nods over to a smaller group, the ones tasked for a quicker death. Not a prized captive, then. Malo can't tell which of the men she's referring to, and the afternoon is bright enough, Ignos is glaring today, that the sheen blurs all the prisoners' faces together.
Your father.
She nods again. More importantly, her grip on the knife relaxes.
I'm sorry.
A miscalculation. She's not grieving yet.
Sorry, you're the ones taking him from me.
Her voice says she hates his words.
You came here.
I don't choose our targets.
Malo protests.
Our priests demand sacrifices, noble ones. Your father will go to a great destiny.
Now she starts to struggle again. Malo pins her hands against the flag of the knife, takes a quick glance and sees a few faces looking their way. The girl doesn't know the danger she's in. Show enough spirit and Jaqen might decide she's sacrifice material after all.
Don't.
Malo switches tactics.
Think about what you want. Revenge?
That's the word that gets her to stop. It's up to him to go.
If you fight now, you'll be taken in a moment. Do not, and you'll have a chance someday to avenge him.
He's not sure why he's saying this, except that he, right now, can't bear to see another fighting spirit die. He just can't. She, too, seems to recognize the moment's futility and drops the knife.
Where will I go?
She says, not really asking him. Malo has no idea. There are other tribes in the jungle, many, but they might do the same to her what Jaqen's going to do to these men. He must have thought too long, because she slips free from his grip and makes her break. He notices too late, she's vanishing into the trees already, that she scooped up his spear along the way. Leaves him empty-handed standing over the cook fire.
She took your spear.
Jaqen says later, as they're about to march from the village.
I did not think she could, High Priest.
Clearly, you underestimated her.
Jaqen says, then turns to the group.
Warriors, the time has come to deliver Ignos's wishes to his altar.
Malo gets up from the stone he's used as a momentary confessional, but feels Jaqen's strong, gnarled hand grab him before he's gone a single step.
I said warriors, Malo.
Jaqen whispers into Malo's ear.
Without a weapon, without your spear, I don't think you qualify.
Chapter 2. A Warrior Must Track. The first thing Malo notices when all of his fellow Char are gone is just how noisy the jungle really is. The constant buzz of insects, hooting birds, and the growls of other animals. The breeze rustling through the leaves playing alongside a distant river's gurgle. It's a symphony far different from the plains in which he lives, where the wind is often the sole source of music. Even with the breeze, though, Malo's still feeling the heat. Sweat drips everywhere, including onto the food he scavenges from the now empty village. Jaqen took the men, and the remaining women and children left, presumably to head for another tribe before even less friendly raiders find them. The hasty packing means Malo has more than enough for an improvised trip into the jungle's heart. Yet gathering what he needs takes time, and it was a late start, so when Malo takes his first steps beyond the village clearing, Ignos is already gliding towards his rest. Trails go cold, trails in the jungle especially so, with all the movement and growth. Malo has a few snapped branches and twigs, broken ferns to mark where the girl entered the forest, but not long after the signs fall away. The ground stops feeding him impressions and the plants refuse to give him any answers. Either she stopped and simply vanished, or she knows how to hide her tracks better than he knows to look for them.
Which is more likely?
Malo mutters to himself. He keeps replaying that moment. She'd been quick, and he'd been happily surprised at her decision to run. So much so that he had lost his most treasured weapon. What was he thinking? Why even bother to save the girl? If she wanted to die right then and there, who was he to stop her? Malo slides his hand to the kukri on his belt. It's a knife as long as his forearm, sharp and with a slightly curved blade that gets fatter as it reaches the point. Useful for hacking away at people, or at the vines crowding his path as he starts doing now. The jungle only gets thicker as he leaves the village and what pruning they did behind. He pauses as purple twilight sets in, brushes away a cloud of insects from his face, sighs as they settle right back. The son of a city stonemason and a weaver has no business here. But he wanted more, and for the Char commoner, more meant either the priesthood or the military. Malo found out quick in front of smaller congregations that he had no gift for sweeping speeches, no soft empathy to guide a struggling member through their trials. What he did have was a knack for the kukri, the black glass spear, and delivering of punishment to his enemies. What started as schoolyard brawls progressed rapidly to a deadlier art, one that helps him not at all in the thick forest. There's nothing to kill here. Nonetheless, he soldiers on, towards that gurgling river. Since she ran off without supplies, Malo figures she'll have to seek water and food from somewhere. It's nearly dark by the time he makes the river, where he startles off a pair of boars who've been drinking from its current. The river's a wide one, and the waters froth over brown and green rocks on the bottom. Not deep, and easy to cross. Malo looks up at the sky, which is actually visible over the swath the river cuts through those trees, at the stars beginning to peek out. It's getting too dark to forge through the jungle, and this is as good place to camp as anywhere. Preferably not, though, on ground level. Malo looks for a tree to climb, but the jungle here is full of reedy, smaller trees stretching with minimal branches high into the sky. Not easy to scale, impossible to sleep in, so Malo settles for the dirt, brushes away the sticks and stones and leaves until only black, moist sand sits beneath his feet. Malo takes a small bedroll from his pack and lays it out, gathers some of the brush, and using a scrap of flint and his kukri blade, strikes a flame. There's a chance the fire will draw someone to him. Malo hopes that someone is her. Nothing comes. Malo eats a bit of the leftovers he stole from the old village's cook fires, drinks some of the water from the river after boiling it in the small clay bowl he keeps wrapped in the bedroll. Makes plenty of noise doing all this, too. Still nobody comes. Malo says a prayer to Ignos, asks the great god to forgive his foolishness, asks for Ignos' blessing and redemption. Then, despite the pestering bites and nibbles of curious critters, Malo lets his fire trickle down as he falls asleep. Chapter 3. A Warrior Must Sing. Malo wakes up with a sharp point pressing against his neck. It's cool and hard, and as Ignos has not yet returned to the sky, Malo can't see whomever's holding it against his throat.
Why did you follow me?
The voice whispers, and he knows in an instant it's the girl.
I need that back.
Malo replies. He hasn't moved from his bedroll, but his hand inches towards the kukri on his belt. The short knife would, at this distance, be just as effective as the spear.
After all you've taken from me, you're coming to ask for something else?
She says, and there's plenty of bitter venom in her voice.
I should kill you.
Why haven't you?
Malo says, because he's hoping that he can buy another second, another inch for his hand to creep.
Because I want to find your friends. I want my revenge.
She stands up suddenly, loosens the spear from his neck and stamps it once against the ground. Malo hears the rustling ferns and is blinded by sudden uncovered torchlight. As he adjusts, Malo finds himself surrounded by women and older children. All of them are armed with a fool's medley of rocks and stone carving knives. A few bear crude swords and spears. One has a bow and Malo counts quick, 4 arrows.
Your people took ours.
The girl says, and it's clear from the way they're looking at her that they think she's the leader.
We want them back. You can find other sacrifices.
What do you want from me?
Malo says, sitting up and staring at the stern faces around.
Show us where your force is going, and we won't kill you.
She replies, then leans in close.
Right away.
Knowing what she wants and who she has helping her has Malo concerned, as he looks over the angry eyes staring out in the dark. The group comes in all shapes and sizes, from weathered to fresh spring, scarred and thin to large and soft. Not one of them looks to him like a warrior. Not a one of them looks like they can hold their own in a pitched battle, even if all of them are tough in their own way. Malo thinks his own mother is as tough as they come, but put a spear in her hand and she would be as lost as any of these.
I can take you.
Malo says at last.
I can lead all of you out of here, away from your homes and the land you know to go after my friends, after Yakan and his soldiers. But what we find at the end of that road will be all of you dead or taken.
He pauses to let the words sink in, an effect he's learned from Jackan's many speeches.
Or you can choose to stay, to rebuild your lives and accept the course that Ignos has given to you. At least, that way, you'll have a chance.
He's hoping to see some expressions change, hoping another voice will rise up in synchrony with his and calm them down, persuade them to a better course of action. Instead, all those eyes to shift to the girl and wait. She, for her part, shakes her head.
I'm not making a deal with you. We tried that. We tried to negotiate with you. That brought us nothing but sorrow. So now this is what we're telling you to do. Bring us vengeance.
There's not a wavering soul among the 24 that stand around him. Malo opens his mouth. He's about to start again. Because as much as he wants his spear, as much as he wants to return home, he does not want to see all these people die. And that's what will happen, either here or upon an altar. But before he can say a word, a small voice from the back begins to sound a prayer. As if this is some secret signal, all the others join in, and they drown out the jungle's noises with a sacred ritual of the solar people. Malo's heard it before, though only from captives as they're marched away from their homes. It's a defiant oath, an acceptance of their current hardships and the promise, with the help of their God, that they will be strong, that they will rise above in this life or another to claim their salvation. It's a powerful song, sung there in the night. Their voices rise within them, and he realizes he's saying the words too. She notices the girl, but she doesn't stop. None of them do. Morning dawns with Malo starting awake, not even realizing that he'd fallen asleep. All he recalls are the burning torches and the voices rising in one prayer after another. Songs and chants that slowly died as people settled into bedrolls or the soft sand and collapsed into slumber. Malo's so tired from the march that he didn't make it long, there in the warm shelter of the glowing torches. He's not the only one awake now. She's up for one, filling a small urn over by the river. He gets himself up, scoots off his bedroll and goes over to meet her. It's a nice morning, cool yet without Ignos focusing too much of his attention on them. Just enough of the gods' rays shine through the leaves and scatter rainbows along the still-gathered mist that fills the jungle in the nearly morning. Beyond the river it's quiet. Only the ever-present buzzing of insects accompanies Malo's approach.
You know our prayers.
She says as Malo squats next to her.
Your people and ours are neighbors. It wouldn't be smart of us not to know.
Us?
She nearly chokes on the word.
What about you? Did you feel it last night? What makes the solar who we are?
It's true. Malo can't deny it. There's something about a small group singing courage to themselves and their god that he doesn't get in Dimantem, where thousands upon thousands throng for daily prayers, where his voice is washed out by so many others rather than rising in concert.
It is different.
Malo gives her that much.
It's all we have now. My father used to tell me the solar only survive because of Ignos, that we have been torn apart so many times we should have died if not for his graces.
Then you should know Ignos wants this.
Malo dares to say.
That he wants you here? Why else would your priest make you search for a simple spear, of which there must be so many where you're from? How would you have followed my trail? I tried to hide my tracks, without Ignos guiding you.
So that I can stop you. Suicidal vengeance is not what your people need now.
They're not my people.
She fires back.
We are together, and you will do as we say because you owe us that much.
She's made a judge of his character, a good one. Malo knows he can't refuse. Because she's right. If they want to throw away their lives like this, if they want to end their suffering in one hopeless battle, who is he to deny them?
If you want to catch them, you will have to move.
Malo looks at the water. It's so peaceful and empty. De Montem is surrounded by riverways. Malo would go to their banks when he had time, sit and watch boats flow up and down with their catches, with their crates of things for trade or sale, refuse from a crowded city swirling in the eddies. Here, though, the water is unsullied, pure, clear, and beautiful with the reflections of the trees above showing on its surface. He wants to hold on to the moment, but she keeps going.
I'll get them up.
She says, then catches him by surprise with a slight smile.
I just realized. What's your name? I need something to call you.
Malo.
She says her name is Nyla, and then she's off, the water swishing in her urn. Chapter 4. A Warrior Must March. Later, Malo's backtracking through the jungle, only this time not alone but at the head of a strange force. In daylight he gets a clearer picture of what Nyla's army looks like. There are a few young boys in it, the oldest maybe 12 seasons, not hardened at all. Mothers and sisters, wives and daughters. There's not a hopeless look among them, not an ounce of fear. Despite their lack of training, weapons, and chances of success, they're determined, which is something. For part of the walk, Malo allows himself to think that maybe they'll earn a place in De Montem. Maybe they'll get something besides an execution.
You need better weapons.
Malo says to Nyla. She's staying next to him at the front of the column.
Most of what you have won't hold up in a fight. Not for a second.
I know. We need food too. We have to go back to our village. There's some things I doubt your force found.
Malo supposes it's possible. They weren't there to loot the place after all. A sacrifice is more valuable than any gem, any treasure. Besides, Diaken wouldn't want to sully the honor of those he's taking by desecrating their town as well.
You ever use that?
Malo says as they walk. She's still holding his spear, though her grip is oddly placed towards the back end of its haft.
Not all of us have swords and knives. I fought with sticks and staffs, bamboo branches long and thick. This is not so different.
Try to hit someone over the head with this, and you'll find it doesn't work so well. This is a short spear. You should be holding it further up if you want to strike. Jab, not thrust. Strike and dodge.
Nyla glances at the weapon as they trudge over a bed of ferns and wildflowers.
It doesn't matter. Ignos will be with us.
You'll be saying that when you die, if you go on as you are.
We're stronger than you think.
It's not your strength that I'm worried about. It's your weapons, your training, what this group will do the first time they get into a real fight.
We'll surprise you.
Where did your village come from?
Malo says during a break. The entire crew is gathered in a leafy clearing made, apparently, when some storm had toppled a large tree. They're sitting around it, perched on the trunk and squashing small plants as they devour a lunch of fruit and edible roots foraged along the way.
We were part of a larger tribe that outgrew the land it had, so we elected to leave.
Outgrew?
She gestures, vines and trees and the screams of birds in the distance.
Does your home look like this?
Malo shakes his head, describes De Montem and its tens of thousands, its endless fields overflowing with fruits and vegetables, its pens swimming in animals ready for slaughter. There are the poor and the starving, yes, but on the whole, Malo thinks that Shar keep their people living, and living well. He's expecting Nyla to acknowledge that, to state how much better that Shar have it, but instead he only gets a small smile.
You think you have everything. But what do you do when you want to be alone? When you want to run through the trees or swim in a pool?
There are pools in Dementem.
Malo counters. He doesn't say you need to pay for them, and that they're often cramped and crowded.
And trees?
Some.
Nyla donates him a nod.
We can go in any direction here. My family, our friends, we grew tired of where we were. So we chose to leave. Set up our own village, made our own laws. Freedom, Malo. Have you ever known it?
There's a rigid series of steps from Malo's birth that brought him here. Choices, made by his parents, teachers, priests, and leaders. Few made by him. Malo's not naive enough to see no value in that. Knows there's quite a lot he's gained from that structure. But when Nyla's asking him if Malo's created his own life, if he's known freedom, he has to shake his head. Not her kind, no. Chapter 5. A Warrior Must Try. Ignos is sliding well into afternoon by the time they make it near the village that has become the source of Malo's frustrations. He and Nyla lead the column, but he's the one that holds up his hand for them to stop as they head into the last batch of trees before the clearing.
There are shadows moving beyond the tree line.
Malo whispers, wincing at the conversation springing up among children and their mothers, one sister to another behind him.
You don't think it's branches moving in the breeze?
Nyla replies, but she crouches next to him anyway, hiding her face behind the leaves of a fern. At Malo's headshake, Nyla gives a quick, sharp whistle that immediately culls the crowd into silence. They drop to the ground too, and most draw what weapons they have and hold them ready. It's an impressive maneuver, and one that gives Malo the slightest bit of hope that this force isn't going to be a complete mess come real combat.
Let's get close.
Malo suggests.
Just you and I, though.
Nyla nods, exchanges a quick glance and palm-up wave of her hand with the woman behind them, who passes the signal down the column. Then she taps Malo on the arm. They're clear to move. Malo walks by rolling his feet, placing his heel first and then gradually sliding the rest of his foot to meet it. The motion is slow but keeps the impact light. No snapping twigs and crackling leaves are muffled by the gradual breakup of their fibers. Nyla, who's proving to be a lot more than the villager he imagined, catches on quick, and the two shift their way to the very edge of the trees without a single sound, breaking through the jungle's ambient rustles and cries. The village has 4 main houses, and each one is squat and square. One is recent stone. Malo can tell because the rocks themselves aren't scarred from weather or painted over, and the rest are thatched bamboo and other branches. In the middle stands the humble beginnings of a tier, only about 1 meter high and built upon a single large slate stone. Standing next to it and watching his hunter move is the clear leader, marked by the plumes of bright red and yellow feathers around his neck. Malo bets that if the man turns the necklace over, each and every one of those feathers would be pure black. These aren't Shar warriors, not a follow-up raid from Dementem, which would be odd. No, these are solar.
They're from our old tribe.
Nyla confirms Malo's suspicions with a whisper.
Probably coming to trade. And now they think we've left it all behind.
Doesn't look like they mind.
The leader is standing over a small pile of crude weapons, tools, and Malo spies a couple of bracelets on his wrists that don't fit.
It's not honorable to steal.
Nyla has an edge now.
They shouldn't be.
They think you're dead or gone.
Malo interrupts.
The question is whether they'll give it back when you prove them wrong.
Nyla doesn't look too sure about that.
I don't know. My father, the other warriors might, but I never dealt with them.
They wait a little longer. Malo hoping these fighters, of which he counts nearly a dozen, will leave and spare him the trouble of making a decision. Nyla, for her part, seems to be flipping between excitement and that fear that comes when a bluff is suddenly called. Will her band actually survive a fight if she pulls them into one?
We can't just stay here.
Malo says as the sky turns an orange-purple.
Either we ask them to leave and give back your home, or we run and try to find some other place to stay.
Leaving would mean giving up. Giving up what we came for.
Then we're going.
Stay ready.
Nyla says back to the group.
We don't know what they're going to do.
Normally, Malo isn't much for head-on tactics. It's generally a blunder to show your force and march them right to the enemy. Except, he's not sure these are the enemy. And he's not leading soldiers. He's not leading people who can march in formation, or who can take battle tactics and implement them. So he leads the mob out of the woods and startles the hunters milling about the center of the village. Some are still carrying their latest plunder as all of them turn to regard who's caught them in the act. It's a moment of truth, and Malo's hoping they'll start to retreat, or at least get cautious. What he gets is nothing more than a couple of smiles. Not what he wants.
Tasa, you've come at a bad time.
Nyla opens the conversation. Malo realizes she knows the leader, who Nyla's addressing with a hard steel voice.
The Char attacked our village. We lost many.
The leader with the feathers takes a step towards them. Up close, he's tall, with layers of black tattoos spiraled around his chest and arms. His long hair is pulled tight behind his head, and he wears a long, pale scar across one cheek that curls up to meet his lip, one that stretches into a sick smile as he gets a full view of Nyla's force.
This is all you have left.
Tasa almost purrs the words.
One might say you're not even a tribe anymore, Nyla.
What we have,
Nyla replies.
is more than enough for a tribe, more than enough for this village. It's ours, as is what you're wearing, what your hunters are taking.
Malo has to give Nyla this. She's damn brave. Foolish, even. Tasa hardens.
You want these?
His hands pull on the bracelets.
Why? Only a tribe that means to stay alive would need these. You can't do that. There's only one man here, and he barely looks more than a boy.
Malo wants to speak. Shut down this Tasa. But he stays silent when he sees Nyla slide into a merciless grin of her own. This is her fight, her territory. It's up to her what happens next.
I did not ask you, Tasa. You're going to leave what you stole. Then you will walk away from here, back to your home.
Tasa looks over her head towards the column.
Nyla is saying we need to leave.
Tasa's talking to his own warriors now, and Malo knows to their own.
She calls us thieves, looters, the lowest of the low. I, however, believe Ignos understands the service we are providing, and is thanking us for the offer we make to you. Come with us, come back to our village. We will find space for you, work for you.
It is altogether a good offer, one Malo would take if he were in charge.
We do not need a new tribe.
Nyla apparently doesn't think so.
Leave, Tasa. Now.
You spit in Ignos' face, Nyla. As the price for your insolence, we will keep what we've found. You can keep your huts, your ruins.
Tulsa starts to bark orders, to tell his 9 warriors to get ready to go. Nyla cuts Tasa off with a series of long strides forward right up to him. She's well shorter than Tasa, but she makes up for it by standing straight, by bearing the sheer defiance of her being towards Tasa, who can't quite manage his sardonic smile in the face of all that fierceness.
Leave it,
Nyla says.
or we'll take it back.
Malo would have cautioned her against the threat, would have said that a fight is the last thing this group needs, the last thing they can afford. But now he's caught up in it, and he doesn't like that these worthless hunters are taking from a tribe that's already suffered. It's not honorable, and it deserves a reckoning. One that Malo, clutching his kukri, can give. Tasa, for his part, turns his lack of quip into a frown, into narrowed eyes and set shoulders.
You're welcome to try.
That's all he needs say. Malo, the whole group of 20 or so women and children, and Nyla burst forward at Tasa's words and Nyla's following battle cry. They're brandishing their cooking knives, their rocks and stones. The one with the bow aims and looses an arrow, which flies over the heads of everyone and embeds itself in the tier. Malo's feet pound dry grass, his blood surges, and he feels the kukri's lethal weight in his right hand as he runs. The crowd roars around him, both Nyla's villagers and Tasa's warriors calling to Ignos for glory and victory. It's exhilarating. It's madness. Yet Malo's training kicks in and he processes the battle. 10, counting Tasa, hunters bearing short spears and knives tucked in their belts. They array themselves in a line with the tier to their backs, waiting for the mob to reach them, waiting to be broken apart upon the villagers' sacrificial stone, waiting for the villages themselves to die upon their spears. Malo chooses a target towards the middle, a smaller warrior, more slender than Malo, who has his short spear up and ready. It's not black glass like the char, but bamboo with a broken rock tied to the tip. He jabs towards Malo as he closes, but the hunter telegraphs the move with a flick of his eyes and a twitch of his right arm. Malo sidesteps, flips the kukri to his left hand, and with his right, grips the spear and holds it so that the warrior can't pull his weapon back. The kukri finds its mark, a quick dive into the warrior's chest and back out, and then in again, and Malo follows the last stab with a kick to knock the shocked hunter aside. Malo pulls the spear free from the weak, loose grip. Now he has the weapon he needs. Malo turns left, catches the next warrior, busy with a pair of weathered women and their sharpened sticks, with a strike to the side. Another in and out, and in jab sequence, and the warrior's guard is broken. Malo leaves him to the mob. With a moment to breathe, Malo takes stock of the fight. He's looking for a spot to stick the spear, and what he finds is disaster. The Char fight with the intent to take sacrifices. The Solar, from what he understands, do too, but not here, not now. Nyla's group is being laid out, wounded and kicked aside, stabbed and beaten away. The Hunters are doing what they've been trained to do, and Nyla's band doesn't have enough numbers to overcome their calm counterattacks. Their methodical stabs and switches, kicks and dodges. Even as he stands there, Malo sees the beginnings of a retreat. Nyla herself is dragging a young wounded girl back from the line, a bloody scratch on Nyla's own shoulder. Others are abandoning their knives and rocks, choosing instead to pull friends and family away from Tassa's sharp spears. Which means Malo has to run too before Tassa realizes he's still there. So Malo skips back, out of reach as the Hunters reform their line, tend to their own wounded. Tassa, though, takes the moment and calls to Nyla.
This is what you get when you bring women, children to a warrior's game.
Leave.
Nyla protests, but there's cracks in her steel now. Tassa pulls a nasty look, and Malo readies himself to jump between an attack. But one of the Hunters Malo stabbed moans from behind Tassa, and the chief turns, tightens up his face at the sight of his own wounded, and glances back Nyla.
You can have your village, Nyla, until we come back and take it.
Tassa's Hunters pick up their wounded and shuffle out of the clearing towards the north. Nyla and the rest turn to their wounds, and only Malo goes to make sure Tassa keeps moving, to make sure they aren't simply doubling back for an ambush. Only when the Hunters vanish deep into the trees does Malo let loose his taut muscles, take a deep breath for the first time in what feels like forever. Tassa fought with 9 other warriors. In those few moments, they wounded nearly 15 of Nyla's force. Tassa ended with 4 hurt that Malo saw, including the 2 he fought. It isn't funny. It isn't close.
It was a slaughter.
Malo tells Nyla later, as the wounded receive bandages, salves, and rest in front of fires sparked to life.
If he hadn't decided to leave, we all would have died. He might have too, but you would not have a tribe anymore.
Nyla's staring at the flickering flames as though she's seeing her own grim future play out in front of her.
I know.
She turns and her tear-stained face greets Malo. He's taken aback. He wasn't sure Nyla even had that emotion in her.
We'll never catch your people now. Even if we did, we couldn't rescue my father, their fathers and husbands.
Malo doesn't think any of his words will help, so he stays quiet, watches the fire. She's right. She's lucky. His eyes drift over to his black glass spear, resting on the rock beside Nyla. If she lets him take it, then he could go. Take the last reminder away and let her heal. Chapter 6. A warrior must decide. Malo's not sure how much time passes there in front of the fire, listening to its crackle and the slowly settling sounds of the wounded and exhausted around them. At some point, a Saint Malo doesn't see drops a couple bowls of roasted roots and vegetables and a hunk of melon from one of the nearby trees. They eat automatically, in silence. He's never actually lost before. Not in anything other than sparring contests or childhood games. Every engagement with the Char, every foray against rebellious factions or jungle tribes has ended in victory. Most of them with minimal injuries. He finds losing doesn't get better as it marinates with time. What happens instead is he turns to anger, to excuses. Nyla had no reason to fight that battle, no point in risking her entirely unprepared group. She's lucky they're not all dead. A point which Malo skates to another, namely what's he still doing here? All that's waiting by these cook fires, outside these ramshackle homes, is a cutting death whenever Tassa decides to come back.
I think...
Malo rises.
When Tassa comes back, you should go with him. Give up this place and take his offer. Keep your lives.
Nyla says nothing, doesn't turn to look at him. The blankness on her face catches Malo wrong, like someone's grabbed his festering emotions and yanked them front and center.
These people trusting you.
Malo pours heat.
They will do what you say because you promised their village and their lives back. But all they're going to get is death or a sacrifice. You're not a leader. You don't have the right to take their lives into your hands. Give them hope when you have none. Because there is no hope here, Nyla.
At last he gets a reaction out of her. A wince of those eyes, then a half-turned head his way.
You mean we don't have hunters like them? We don't have hardened warriors who know how to jab spears and knives?
Nyla speaks the words like a ghost, numb and dead.
Is that the only way to live in this world? Do we have to go find sacrifices like everyone else? Do I have to hold a spear?
Nyla picks up Malo's weapon.
Do I have to tell the children that they have to learn to use this or they won't survive?
Yes.
There's no time for soft words anymore.
Then I need your help. I know it's not what you intended, but you're right. We won't win as we are. We're strong, yes, and we have courage.
Nayla runs her gaze across the sleeping forms around them.
If your way is the only way, then teach us. Make us hunters, make us warriors. Help my tribe survive.
Malo's shaking his head before Nyla's finished.
I can't. I need to go. And even if I could somehow train all of you before Tasa returns, his hunters will still have experience. They'll still win.
His words rob something from Nyla, and she lets Malo's spear fall to the ground. This time, he picks it up, stands. It's late, but the moon is bright and Malo still has a pack of supplies. If he marches hard, in a couple of days he might catch up to Diakin and the others on the edge of the jungle. After all, one man can move so much faster than many. He doesn't make it 2 steps before he hears Nyla stand up behind him, hears her sharp inhale.
You owe us,
Nyla says, and Malo turns to see the same defiance he witnessed on the day they took her father.
You've taken everything from us, and now you're condemning us to death too. You claim to follow Ignos, but this is against everything he stands for.
1,000 arguments sweep to Malo's lips. Protests about the impossibility of training this ragged group, about how it wasn't really him who took their husbands and fathers, about how Nyla couldn't possibly hold him responsible for Tassa's actions. All those arguments die a withering death beneath the crushing guilt cascading over him. The Char never mean to wipe out the jungle tribes. The Solar are an endless source of sacrifices. That this one would be extinguished, would die by his people's hands. Malo's not sure he can bear that burden. He's not sure if he's capable of abandoning someone so desperate. So he compromises with his own soul.
If I stay.
Malo says slow, feeling out his argument as he says it.
If I stay, you have to listen to me. At least regarding the fighting, the training. We'll have to be partners, Nyla. Because if we aren't, we're all going to die.
Chapter 7. A Warrior Must Teach. The next morning sparks a string of days that flow with constant action. Nyla keeps her promise, and Malo's given time with her people. After an initial run through some exercises, a sprint around the jungle, a test to see how they hold their spears, he takes the 16 women and older children with enough strength to train and divides them into groups of 4. Each set, as the Char call them, gets a leader, a supporting trio of a caller, supporter, and killer. Each leader gets a spear, which they manage to fashion from branches and rocks as best they can, and a series of torn, dyed cloth strips that they wind around their arms. White means run, red means attack, and yellow means they need help. When noise comes to dominate a fight, Malo's learned, having a way to communicate by sight alone can make all the difference. Callers get the rocks and slings made from animal skins, small knives as backups. Malo makes the kids the primary targets for this one, sending them up the trees to where they get their vantage points, and where, with the added fall, even a lightly thrown stone can do some damage. He doesn't tell the children this, but being up high gives them a measure of safety too, a distance from the surefire carnage on ground level. Someone has to be able to get to those that need aid, medical or otherwise. The supporters get sharpened sticks and what scrap weapons they can fashion. They also fill packs with poultices and bandages made from tightly woven moss. Malo emphasizes the stick and run technique with these 4. Staying out of the fight is the best way they can help those stuck in it. And the killers. When he assigned the titles, Nyla looked disappointed that she wasn't placed here. And Malo, looking at the 4 standing in front of him, wonders if he's made the right play. Each and every one of them is a mother, each with a child playing the role of a caller. Nyla, when he told her the names, initially objects, and something in Malo twitches as he says in reply that the reason these women are perfect killers is because they're truly fighting for something more than themselves. The last thing a killer can afford, after all, is a strike that falls short, is a last effort that doesn't go all the way. Nyla hasn't looked at Malo the same way since, and her eyes hit him now with a combination of wariness and respect. Malo tries to throw out more smiles, but he feels he's revealed a dangerous part of himself, and it's not one he can hide. So he dives into the lessons with the killers, who get the rest of the real spears in the village, who get the crude but sharp knives and the thicker moss wraps the village hunters used to wear. One's made to keep claws from drawing blood, but that might turn a loose swipe of a blade. First, the lessons are mostly simple. How to hold the spear, how to stab and lunge, or, in desperation, throw it. With knives, he emphasizes closing quickly, keeping your feet shuffling from side to side and never presenting an easy target. Work the blade in and out without lunging and giving up your options. The idea, Malo says, is to weaken, distract, and disorient your enemy. What he doesn't say is that keeping them alive allows for sacrifice. They've had too much of that. For their part, Nyla's group is eager to learn, from the oldest woman to the youngest son. Malo thinks he understands why. There's an exhilaration to being exposed to things that had been forbidden to you. Most tribes would never teach a mother how to wield the spear, would never give a young boy a pair of knives and tell them how to slice away an attack. No daughter would be taught how to string a bow or shoot an arrow with accuracy. These are molds he's breaking, and from their excitement, the breaking is long overdue. Nights by the fire follow every hard day, spent around the crackling fire sharing progress with Nyla, until Malo collapses on his bedroll exhausted, wishing he was under the glowing lights of his city. Back in Demontem, away from the mosquitoes and the growing fear in his mind that no matter how much he does, this group will not be ready. That no matter how much time he has, Tassa's going to slaughter them all. Chapter 8. A warrior must plan. Word comes in the afternoon. One of the callers, positioned between the village and where Nyla says Tassa's tribe lives, rushes in shouting that they're coming. That it's not just 10 hunters anymore, but as many as 30. 30. Malo hears the number and goes cold. He'd been hoping Tassa would come back with his original 9, that he'd stride right into the village all haughty and confident, allowing Malo's little squads to spring a trap. Now, though, they would be so outnumbered a trap like that wouldn't matter. They'd all be dead anyway.
How long?
He asked the caller, a girl several years younger than Nyla.
A day's march,
The caller replies.
I saw their torches from the top of the crown.
The crown is a rise not far from the village, and one with tall trees that can give a climber a long view of the canopy. Malo's had a caller stationed there every day and night since he formed the squads, and he can tell from the way the children fight over the shifts that contributing is doing wonders for their morale. Even this one, with her dire report, sounds defiant, hopeful.
We can't wait for them.
Nyla says as soon as Malo dismisses the caller. The two of them have just sat down for yet another meal of warmed vegetables and fruit. This time, though, there's a few added scraps of meat, a hunt from the morning that managed to snag some small furry creatures. Malo takes a bite and savors the bland, stringy food. Anything other than the taro lettuce and beans he's been eating every meal since they returned to the village.
Now you want to run?
No, but if we let them get here with that many, we'll die for certain.
The way Nyla says that makes Malo think she has an idea. So he looks at her with the question on his face and waits. Nyla looks like she's waiting for Malo to get the same idea through some magical telepathy, and when it's clear he's not going to, she takes a deep breath and plunges ahead.
We need to hit them earlier. Surprise them.
They're hunters, and this group is not. Run them into the trees and you'll be picked apart.
You don't need to be a hunter to know how to move through the jungle. All of us have called the jungle our home for our entire lives. You couldn't follow my trail, and according to my people, I'm not a hunter.
Nyla's certainly right about one thing, and that's if Tassa's hunters get to the village with their current numbers, they're all dead. Yet the idea of fighting them in the jungle, he realizes fight might be the wrong word. The jungle is a big, crowded place, and a clever soul can make a lot out of its many parts. He starts with an idea. One Nyla grabs, and then they're off and talking through the night, calling over Malo's sets and assigning opportunities, laying out the path for the tribe to survive. Chapter 9. A Warrior Must Deceive. The first hunter picks his way through the ferns, his grip loose and his face hanging in a bored stare. No expectation of an attack a couple of hours out from the village. No thinking that the cowardly assortment waiting for them there would do anything other than die. Which is why the child's thrown rock hits the hunter hard from the tree, scores a blow against the man's head and knocks him to the ground. Malo catches his own breath for a second, watching with bow drawn from the eaves of a tall, spindly tree across the clearing. The hunter can't die here, not till he's done what needs doing. But the hunter still has a bit of life in him, and he stands slowly, left hand held to his temple, and when he pulls it away, showing a bit of red. Then the hunter puts his right hand to his lips and makes a chirping call while his eyes scan the trees, looking for the attacker. When the hunter's eyes find Malo, the Char warrior lets his arrow loose with a soft thrum. Killing isn't something Malo undertakes lightly. It's distasteful, a waste. Yet he hopes Ignos, burning above and witnessing every second, will forgive him this one. Will understand that the hunter's body, now back down in the dirt, is nonetheless a pleading tribute to the god from a tribe in desperate need. Malo sets another arrow to the string, ignores the bugs biting at his legs. His thirst after sitting in this tree for the last hour. Everything falls away as the end begins. Answering chirps come next, the hunter's friends. 5 of them weaving through the wilderness, spears in hand. These aren't like the makeshift ones wrought from bamboo and whatever sharp rock Malo could find, but actual edge stone corded onto solid shafts. Each hunter has a knife looped through a rope around their waist, along with a water skin. Moss wraps act as loose skirts, while inked tattoos cover their back and chests. Most of the hunters wear the glowing halo of Ignos front and center, but what surrounds the god is different on every body. Malo's not close enough to identify anything other than that the symbols differ from one person to the next. But if these hunters are like Shar warriors, then every inked icon stands for something that hunter has achieved. Given the sheer number of tattoos on these, it's clear Tasa isn't bringing his tribe's youngest fighters to this battle. The habits of experience aren't an advantage when you're facing something unpredictable. The 5 stalk their way to the body of their friend and the arrow sticking out from his chest. One cups his hands in front of his mouth, about to, Malo's sure, announce a loud warning call. But before a sound escapes his lips, another missile. This one a stiff green melon, plummets from a treetop at devastating speed. It hits the hunter and shatters into a juicy pink explosion that sends its target to the ground. As the other 4 turn to look at what's happened, Malo looses his second arrow. It flies straight. Not that hitting a standing still target is all that difficult for the trained Shar warrior. And the arrow embeds itself in the closest hunter's back. He collapses too, and Malo mutters a quick prayer to Ignos for forgiveness, and runs. The remaining 3 hunters give chase. Malo hears them crunching through the ferns, hooting after him. On his right, Malo sees a tree with a single slash down the bark. As soon as his foot plants even with the tree, Malo cuts hard left. There's a small root-covered slope here leading to a muddy pit, one that's hard to see through the long ferns leaves providing cover. The warrior plants on the last root and leaps, covering most of the pit in a single bound. But not all of it. His left foot lands in the goop and begins to sink, the cool slime sucking at his toes. Malo leans forward, grabs at the hard ground with his hands and tries to pull himself out. Behind him, he can hear them coming closer, can hear them stop at the edge of the pit.
Warrior, why do you run?
One of the hunters calls to Malo.
Ignos thinks poorly of your cowardice, of your killing.
Malo turns back, sees that the hunters are holding their spears ready, though none appear about to throw one at him. Instead, the speaker is watching him, while the other 2 scan the treetops. They've learned.
You claim Ignos' favor on your way to slaughter a village of women and children.
Malo replies.
Slaughter.
The hunter shakes his head.
Tasa told us only to take those that are willing. Those that are not go to great honor. You are the one that slaughters.
There's a moment where the hunter waits for Malo to push back on that claim. But the Shar warrior can't fight what's true, and stays silent.
You could redeem yourself, Thar.
The hunter continues a second later.
Give yourself to us. Join Ignos and atone for your crimes.
That
Malo mutters to himself.
is not going to happen.
With a yank and a slippery lunge, Malo gets his knees up out of the mud, pulls himself up.
Another move, Char, and your journey ends.
The hunter warns from behind him. They're waiting for Malo to turn, and when he does, expectant looks paste on their faces. One who'd been watching the trees has his spear hefted, point glistening right towards Malo's heart. And the Char warrior has no doubts the hunter could place it there before Malo made another step, which means it's time.
Then I relent.
Malo cries back to the hunters.
Come and take me.
He sits on the soft dirt and leaves, his legs dangling towards the mud pit, eyes tracking to the hunters, who, themselves, appear to be unsure of what to do with their new catch. After a few moments glancing towards each other, fishing for ideas that aren't coming, the lead hunter gestures for his 2 fellows to make the trip. They're all wearing small coils of tan, spindly rope on their waists, and Malo knows they plan on wrapping his wrists tight together. They'll never get that chance. The lead hunter takes up aim with the spear, keeping its point hefted towards Malo's face as the other 2 begin to wade through the mud towards him. Once they're a meter along, the mud is up over their knees, making progress slow, making them easy targets.
Tasa should never have come back.
Malo says, and at this the two coming hunters pause.
The village is not his to take.
There's no battle cry as it happens, no cheer or call to Ignos, just a rustle, a blur of movement, and then Nayla and another woman, older but made of iron, come around the bend and attack the lone hunter still on the back. The spears they're wielding are newer, better than the sticks the village had, and they've come directly from the bodies Malo left arrowed back in the glade. The spears find new homes before the hunter even turns around, and the two women yank them free as the hunter collapses forward into the mud. Malo uses the moment too. He stands, slips the bow from around his shoulders and has another arrow aimed and ready. He catches Nyla's face, full of triumphant fury, and shakes his head.
Ignos demands we take them alive.
Malo calls across the pit to her.
There's been too many dead today already.
The hunters, both still wielding spears, look at each other, at the angry women on the bank, and throw their weapons into the mud. Chapter 10. A Warrior Must Understand. 25 left, the two hunters say once they're tied and sitting in front of a fire in the village.
Take me to Ignos if you like.
One says when Nyla asks why he's being so forthcoming.
Why should I hide your own death from you? Tarsa is going to take this village, and no amount of your clever tricks will stop him.
They stopped you pretty well.
Nyla counters.
We were stupid. Tarsa told us we were approaching a village of women and children. He was wrong, but when we fail to return, Tarsa will know what's happened. He won't make our mistake.
Malo's watching the exchange, his mouth full of tart pear. This ambush was a victory, but tomorrow Tassa's main force would arrive. They managed 5 today and somehow had to claim 5 times that tomorrow. The thought should have had the entire village spooked, but Malo didn't see a single downcast stare, hear a sharp word, or feel a hint of fear coming from any of the other villagers.
You didn't make a mistake.
Nyla's still going at the captive hunter.
We caught you. We beat you. And we'll do the same to the rest of your friends.
The hunter laughs at this, and Malo's heard enough. They're not going to get anything useful from him. So Malo stands, taking a last bite of the pear, and goes behind the warrior. Nyla, mouth open for another pointless retort, stops as she sees Malo draw his kukri and place the edge of the knife against the hunter's throat.
Ignos doesn't need his sacrifices to speak.
Malo whispers.
You want to keep your tongue? You'll keep quiet.
The hunter takes the hint, and with the help of a couple of wiry grandmothers who know how to tie a knot or two, Malo wraps the hunter to a tree at the edge of the village. Just to be safe, they take a scrap of cloth and gag the man too. A shout can carry a long ways in the jungle air, and the last thing Malo wants to worry about now is the enemy they've already beaten.
You didn't have to do that.
Nyla says later when Malo rejoins her at the fires.
I wanted to.
As he settles on the log, the tension drains away, and Malo realizes how late it's getting. Nomis, Ignos' sister, is high in a dark sky peppered with stringy clouds, casting her silvery light down through the flickering flames onto the sleeping villagers. Aside from the ones tasked with keeping watch, mostly children high up in the trees and armed with hollowed collars, this odd collection of desperate fighters seems as content as Malo's own warriors would be the night before a battle. And he's not the only one who's noticed. Nyla's right there with him. But instead of curiosity, Malo sees compassion in the soft frown she's wearing. Worry, even.
You've given them a chance they never had. They wouldn't be here without you, fighting for their home.
They would be alive, though.
Malo laughs lightly.
Any true warrior would tell you that the chance to die for something is far better than living long for nothing. Without you, without this, where would they be? Running in the jungle? Already taken by Tassa or another like him?
Nyla doesn't dispute this, throws Malo a slight thank you smile.
It wasn't something I asked for. I just felt so helpless when your people took mine. I wanted to do something, to take control.
How does it feel?
Nyla cocks her head at him.
To take control?
Malo asks again.
It's scary.
Nyla says after a stare into the fire.
Our village always had ways to flee, points to circle to if something happened like this. I never thought I'd arrive there, and because I held your spear, find myself in charge. But too, the position gives me something to hold on to, a purpose.
When Nyla says the word, it clicks in Malo's mind. The reason he's staying. He's got his spear. He could run hard and catch up with Jaqen and the others. Instead, he's staying here, risking everything for a group of people who, in other circumstances, would love to sacrifice him atop that tier sitting behind Malo right now. Purpose. He has one here, one that's greater than just following orders, taking the prescribed routine and carrying it out to fulfill Jockin or another's objective. No, this runs deeper. It's satisfying like a warm meal, energizing like Ignos rising on a cool morning. The feeling sticks with Malo as he and Nayla talk a while longer, with Malo sharing stories of Demontem and its crowded streets, tall buildings, and crush of people. Until Malo notices Nyla's eyes drifting shut and makes the call to walk their dreams to morning. And morning comes too soon. Chapter 11. A warrior must fight. The hooting bursts of hollowed collars knock Malo from his sleep. It takes a second to realize the grim gray fog of early morning is coating everything, with Ignos not even visible through the trees. As he sits up, Malo reaches with his right hand to pick up his spear from the ground. With his left, he draws the kukri, stands and sees that, for the moment, none of Tassa's hunters have reached the village. But the collars are hooting, so they must be close. The jungle goes silent again. Some of the villagers joining Malo outside the 4 stone houses are surprised. A pair of mothers turn towards their direction, but Malo makes a single click with his tongue, gets their attention.
They have to stop or they'll be found,
Malo whispers.
They know to run.
Malo doesn't say the other reason the callers could be silent. Instead, Malo sees the crowd around him and uses it. Malo calls his sets to their assigned areas. They don't have formations, don't have grand plans, but there's one contingency they've trained for, and it's this one, the surprise attack. It wasn't Malo's idea, but Nyla's. She's seen her own tribe do it before, stream out of the jungle at the break of dawn or the dead of night and take captives before they'd wake up. Somehow, someway, the villagers remember their training. Young and old grab their sticks and spears, their stones and knives, and get where they need to be. There's no walls around the village, so they use the houses instead, position themselves along the edges, where they can't be surrounded, where they can slide back behind cover. A pair of lanky women take the pair of bows and scramble to the top of the tier. Normally a place of honor, but now a tower from which they can let loose across the entire clearing. Malo takes a second to meet their glance once they get up on the tier and raises his kukri in a salute. There's no cover up there, and the archers know it. Malo joins the group at the edge of the chief's house, directly across from the tier and nearest the jungle area from where the calls were coming. 8 villagers, 6 mothers and wives, and a pair of children who appear to be no more than 12 seasons old stand with him. They acknowledge his arrival with a nod, one that he returns. Nyla should be somewhere to his right, the 2 of them holding the centermost houses on the crescent arc made by the village structures. Now Malo sheathes the kukri, holds the spear with both hands, and embraces the taut quiet to peer into the gray shadows beyond the ferns and trees. It's an eerie stillness, marked by the tight breathing around him, and the low hoots of some far-off bird. A cool fog lays across the ground, only just beginning to fade away as Ignos starts to cast his light upon the jungle. Movement, wisps of fog dragging along behind a shadow, 10 strides away, close enough to... The strike comes whistles from between a pair of vine-wrapped trees. It's a rock, and it finds a target next to Malo. Strikes her in the shoulder with a bone-bruising thwack, knocking the older woman to the ground. Immediately, the set supporter grabs the woman and pulls her back under the cover of the chief's house.
Get back! Around the front of the houses!
Malo shouts even as the woman falls beside him. Tassa's playing a game of range, and they can't be in the open. Can't be easy targets. More rocks begin to whiz through the trees as the villagers retreat. No arrows, though, and the hunters are aiming low. Tassa's not trying to kill. Not yet. They fall back around the house and Malo sets up near the open stone door, facing the tier. Through the narrow opening, he watches the pair of archers on top of the tower. Watches as they put arrows to their bowstrings, as they begin to let loose. Those first shots change everything. Pointed arrows aimed at the head and chest mean deadly injury. They mean you're not concerned with Ignos. And once you've sacrificed honor, your opponent has no reason to keep theirs. So Malo and Nyla had told her people to give up their honor, because if Tassa won, the village wouldn't have anything at all. As the arrows start to fly, Tassa's hunters issue a loud and angry roar, a specific word that Malo doesn't understand, and yet knows all the same. The first hunter to yell sounds right outside the house, and his cry is echoed back into the forest many times over. There won't be rocks coming back at the villagers now. It'll be arrows, throwing spears and knives. What could have been a bloodless affair. What could have ended with the prisoners tied for sacrifice will now be a massacre one way or another. Malo hopes they're ready. A dozen instincts take hold of Malo at once as he sees Tassa's hunters in front of him. Hours spent during the hot Demontim days, in dirt courtyards with Shar warriors arrayed around him. Captains wearing thick lion manes stand at four corners, barking orders at them, lunge with the left, twist and sweep the leg low, draw the kukri and stab, over and over again until the motions become a swirling dance. In the cool mist of the early jungle morning, Malo falls into that dance again. He lunges towards the closest hunter, who's still drawing back his short bow and only just beginning to look away from the archers on top of the tier towards Malo. The hunter's reaction is slow, far too slow. Malo doesn't stab deep. To do so risks catching the spear on a rib or snaring it in muscle. A quick dart into the chest, and then Malo's moving towards the right side of the line, twisting his body around, pivoting on his right foot, to whip the spear around towards the next hunter, whose arrow is drawn back, about to fire. Malo's throw is faster. His spear crosses the 2 meters as the hunter releases his hold on the bowstring. The spear's point, thick, sharp black glass, slices through the arrow as it begins its forward flight. The spear embeds itself in the hunter, but Malo's too busy completing his pivot to watch, bringing up the kukri in his left hand to meet the shadow streaking towards his face. This hunter, coming from the jungle, comes at Malo with a solar club. A chunk of thick wood with sharp rocks embedded all around the head. The weapons are both crude and terrible, capable of both breaking bones and rending skin. Malo's kukri meets the larger weapon in a crunching block that numbs Malo's wrist. The kukri, though, bites deep into the club's wood, sticking both weapons to each other and giving Malo a moment's stare into the halo deep blue tattoos coating the face of the hunter in front of him. Malo's expecting to see hate there, anger, or maybe fear. The things he's seen in the eyes of tribes they've raided before. Instead, he finds determination, steady focus. Then the moment's gone as Tassa's hunters and Nyla's force of women and children clash together around them. Malo knows he can't let the hunter get his club back, so instead of pulling the kukri out, Malo leans in as the hunter wrenches back. With his right hand, Malo punches forward, hits the hunter with a jab to the throat. He feels a snap, and the hunter drops the club, staggers backward. Malo doesn't watch the rest. He separates the two weapons and enters the rest of the fray, following the sounds of screams and flashes of instinct to guide him from one target to the next. The only strategy at this point is survival. A battle has no clock, no defined duration. Malo marks its periods by moments of quiet between swinging weapons, bloody sprays, and flying stones. His line of devastation has moved beyond the chieftain's house, and while Malo's sporting a dozen cuts and bruises, while his arms are exhausted and the club is missing chunks of its body, he's still alive, which can't be said for many on both sides. Their bodies, wounded or dead, litter the ground around him, and it's hard to tell if Nyla's villagers are winning. Malo only knows by the continuing battle cries that all of them have not lost. Nyla, though, still lives. Malo sees her in front of him, struggling near the last house, and it's easy to see why. Tassa's there, and he has her pushed back against the side of the building. A pair of other hunters have set up a perimeter, staking out the fight with spears of their own. Only it's not a fight. Nyla has heart, she's determined, but Tassa's an experienced hunter, and as Malo starts to head towards them, Tassa knocks away Nyla's spear with his own, levels the point of his weapon against her chest. Malo can't hear what Tassa's saying, and he doesn't care. 2 strides into his run, as Tassa's guarding hunters orient towards him, Malo plants his left foot into the soft ground and launches the battered club. The weapon swirls through the air, tumbling end over end in a sloppy motion that nonetheless carries it into Tassa's back. The impact makes him stumble, and one of the stone shards cuts a long red line through Tassa's skin. Nyla uses the moment. She squeezes out from under Tassa's spear, slips her left leg between Tassa's own as the hunter glares back towards Malo, and the last thing Malo sees before he has to dodge the stabbing spears of Tassa's guards is the chief falling towards the ground. Malo, now, only has a kukri, and he dances back from the probing stabs of the hunters. They're playing it safe with their short spears, feeling out Malo's flexibility, knowing they have reach, knowing they have numbers, knowing they have time. The two of them try for another dual stab, with the left hunter going low and the right aiming high. Again, Malo hops back, but this time he lands on the front of his feet, bends his knees, and dives to the right, beneath the hunter's spear. Malo rolls, pauses for a half-second to slash the back of the hunter's knee with his kukri, and then keeps going. Pulls up to his feet a meter behind the two hunters, one of which is now kneeling, hands gripping his wounded limp leg. Much as he'd like to spare a glance back towards Nyla to see how she's faring, Malo has one more hunter to deal with. This one's sporting twin arcs of red dye coming together across his chest in a circle. Ignos. He's also picked up his friend's spear, making it 2 long weapons against Malo's trusty kukri. There's no waiting this time from the hunter, no caution. He jumps forward in a long lunge with his right, then tracks Malo's dodge with the spear in his left. Malo feels the burn as the second strike rakes across his shoulder, the hot wet gracing his skin. It's desperation and blind reflex. Malo sweeps the kukri back and forth, tosses it from one hand to another, as he blocks and dodges the seemingly endless stabs from the solar hunter. The spears score another cut, then a third along Malo's thigh, and the Char warrior knows he's not going to win this one. He can't get close, so Malo starts to backpedal, though he can't turn around to see where he's going. Hopes that maybe he'll see something, find some villager still alive, someone able to help. The hunter, though, comes after him with a murderous gleam. There's no threats, no taunts, only the pure, focused joy of eliminating a threat. They're both so immersed in the duel that neither one notices for a moment the sudden appearance of an arrow sticking out from the hunter's chest. The solar only realizes it's there when his swings suddenly fall short, when his left hand falters and the spear in it falls to the ground. Malo meets his eyes, sees the hunter's confusion, and sees it fade a moment later as the fighter collapses. Behind him, on two of the tier, the two fighters had wandered near, and sporting several deep injuries of her own, the one remaining archer gives Malo a quiet nod and knocks another arrow. Malo runs back to where Tassa and Nyla were fighting. He doesn't have any idea how the rest of the battle is going. It doesn't matter anyway. If the hunters are winning, he'll be dead. If the hunters lose, but Tassa kills Nyla. But what he finds as he rounds the corner is Nyla standing, dirty, sweaty, and wounded, but standing, over Tassa. Nyla's holding the chieftain's spear, and its point is drawing a small stream of blood from Tassa's chest.
You're going to leave, and you're going to tell your tribe and all the others that this village still lives. My tribe survives.
Nyla's more breathing the words than actually saying them, her shoulders shaking as she tries to keep her grip. Malo comes closer, kukri in hand. His feet land on leaves and they crackle. Nyla whips around, brings the spear up towards Malo, and Tassa takes advantage.
Don't!
Malo tries to warn, but he's way too late. Tassa sweeps his arm through Nyla's left leg, picks her off her feet and dumps her down off of him. In a second, he's on her, wrestling the spear away. In 2 seconds, Malo's diving into the chieftain, pushing him off Nyla. Together, with Tassa managing to find Malo's left wrist and holding it, keeping the kukri away, they roll across the dirt and grass. With his free hand, Malo goes for a swing at Tassa's face, but the chieftain slams his head forward instead, getting inside Malo's punch and slamming into Malo's chin. There's a warm splash in his mouth as Malo's teeth bite into his lip, and his skull rings as Tassa's blow drives Malo's head into the ground. And in that moment, the chieftain rips Malo's kukri away, cutting his own hand in the process. Tassa juts his right knee into Malo's chest, and the Char feels what air he has left sputter out of his lungs.
A cowardly attempt.
Tassa whispers, turning the kukri for a stab.
Ignos would never approve.
Malo tries the same tactic, reaches for Tassa's wrist to keep the kukri away, but there's no strength. Tassa simply presses through the attempt.
You would have made a bountiful sacrifice.
Tassa whispers as he slides the knife against Malo's throat.
You will make one.
Nyla's voice is iron, and she punctuates her words with a strong swing of Tassa's spear, sending the haft cracking into the chieftain's head. Chapter 12. A Warrior Must Rest. By the time Ignos descends that night, the villagers have burned their 12 dead, along with the 8 hunters that joined them. Malo stands over the flames with the remaining villagers, Nyla, and the sole bright spot of the battle, a bound Tassa. Even the chieftain, though, adopts a solemn stare.
We lost too much.
Nyla sighs, standing next to Malo. With Tassa captive, the hunters called for peace. A deal the villagers, Nyla and Malo included, were happy to take. In exchange for leaving with their lives, and for giving the villagers their own, the hunters left with a promise not to return except to trade. Ignos, though, demands a sacrifice from the loser of any struggle, And as Tassa began this fight, he bears the final cost of it.
So you'll leave.
Any question of staying is denied by a glance around the funeral circle. More children than mothers and grandmothers survived, especially the ones in the trees, whose alarms had given their families a chance to protect themselves. They are too young to carry out the essential labor, hunting, growing, building, that a true tribe needs.
We'll find another. There will be tribes looking for more members, especially children they can groom to suit their own needs.
I thought you didn't want that.
What I want doesn't matter anymore. I tried that, and all we did was get these people killed. All my anger bought me was the lives of others.
Malo says nothing for a moment, but takes another look around the fire. It's quiet now, at the start of twilight, as if even the jungle senses the morning. Sadness caresses the villagers' faces, but Malo doesn't see despair. Rather, determination lurks in their set mouths, in the way even the younger ones still hold their spears. The surviving mothers have already taken charge of the orphans, too, and cook fires are lit and burning near the houses.
They press on. You taught them that. You gave them honor, bravery. I don't envy any Solar or Shah tribe that tries to fight any of them. Any tribe you join will find itself blessed by Ignos beyond any expectation.
Malo can't tell if the words help Nyla, but she doesn't speak any more of losing, or of what comes next. She doesn't speak at all, and Malo, his mouth hurting and his body sore, lets the crackling night come down slow. Morning brings early motion. Malo's up as Ignos dawns, his pack stuffed with enough provisions for the walk to Dimantem, though he's hoping he'll catch up with Diakin and the others a little beyond the jungle. Especially as he's not going alone.
You're taking him then?
Nyla says, emerging from the house to watch as Malo kicks Tassa awake.
I think your village has seen enough death lately.
Malo replies, then glances down at the hunter.
Besides, Tassa is a chieftain. He deserves a sacrifice worthy of his title atop the golden altars.
You would walk all that way to people that abandoned you?
There's a question in Nyla's eyes, one that can't be directly asked because she knows as well as he does what he would have to say.
I have not abandoned them.
Malo replies, though the words are harder to speak than he thinks.
I was asked to return with my spear.
Malo holds it up.
I have it, and I mean to do as I was commanded.
The thought of staying in the jungle had flirted in Malo's mind all night, in between his dreams and the sounds of the night. These villagers, though, didn't need a fighter any longer. Any tribe they found would see Malo as a threat, and he'd likely find himself dragged to the top of a tier, sacrificed as an enemy of the Solar peoples. Besides, he's longing for the sound of crashing waves instead of buzzing mosquitoes, the smells of 100 cooking spices and the laughter of many thousands of people. A journey to the jungle is fine, but Malo knows he's a city man.
Well then, Malo of the Tshar.
Nyla says.
Thank you for lending me your spear.
Malo raises it slightly so that the black glass tastes Ignos' first light and scatters it across the village, gives Nyla one last nod, then pulls on the rope tied to Tassa's wrists and begins the long walk home. This concludes The Spear, a Skyward Saga short story by A.R. Knight. Continue the Skyward Saga in Starshot, or find more adventures at blackeybooks.com. Thanks for listening.